Hey guys, it's Elena. Today I'm going to start my watercolor landscape series with the first video where we will be painting a watercolor sunset with some mountains in the background. And for this painting I will be using my brand new watercolor brush set, which is for sale in the link below. And if you don't have this brush set, that's okay. You can use any other watercolor brushes that you do have. And we'll be using the Procreate app as always, and a photo from Unsplash, which is free, and I've added the link for that down in the description as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is the one that I painted yesterday, and we're going to do something a little bit like this, just a very simple, colorful landscape that looks like a sunset. So I'm going to start a new canvas that is 3000 by 2000 pixels at 300 dpi. And I'll go ahead and set up my paper. So to do this, I'm just going to add 3 layers, and the bottom layer will be paper, the middle layer will be for painting, and we might add another as well, and then the top layer will also be for paper. So I'm going to go to my watercolor paper palette that comes with the brush set. And I think I'm gonna go ahead and choose the second color. And from my watercolor basics folder, I'm choosing rough watercolor paper. And then I'm just gonna cover this whole page. And I've got it about 2/3 of the way up here. So the size of the grain will depend on how high or low you have your size on the brush. Okay, that's fine. So now on the layer number 3 here, I'm going to tap this N and change the blend mode to color burn. And then I will fill this one with a slightly darker color and a different paper. I'm just going to choose handmade watercolor paper. And this is just for a little bit of variety in the paper. And so because that is color burn, you can't really see it yet, but you'll see it on top of the painting layer once I start to paint there. So I'm just gonna go ahead and open up Unsplash. So I've got the Unsplash app on my iPad, and I have put a link for this photo down below. This is the photo that we're going to be using. So I'm going to go over here and open up my reference layer. So under Canvas, Reference, make that open, and then select Image. Take the photo from Unsplash and drag it over. Great, and I'm also going to make a color palette based on this photo as well. So I'm going to grab it again and drag it up to my color palettes. So now we have our sunset colors up here. So I'm going to just make this a bit smaller, put it up in the corner, and we can go ahead and get started. So you can see on these mountains here that they're sort of a dark purplish color. So I think it's this color here. And I'm just gonna start with my standard round brush, and I will add the mountain in a really rough way, sort of sketch it out. And then I will use the blender brushes to smooth it. So I'll show you what I mean in just a moment here. I'm going to use a little bit of this dark reddish color as well. Okay, so with regular watercolors, normally you would be able to just take a wet brush with water and then make a wet spot here and then float the paint into it so that it just covers the part that has water in it. So that's a technique that a lot of people use with regular watercolor. And what I'm going to show you is sort of the same thing, but the other way around. So first we add the color, and then we use the blender brushes instead of water to float it out. So I'm going to switch to my blender brush folder here, which also comes with the brush set. And I'm just going to first use my very smooth blender, which is pressure sensitive. And I'm going to start to float this all downward. So I do like how this looks, how it sort of fades downwards as if I had floated it in the using that watercolor technique. However, I would like to have a couple of sort of blobs that look like they've bled at the top here. So I'm going to take the blender brush and just experiment with that a little bit. And I'm kind of enjoying how there's a couple different lines here because I had used the round brush over top of itself several times. It does actually look a little bit like mountains in the distance here. So I'm liking that. However, I do want to have a bit more texture on top of this. So I'm going to just take the color over to the white, but not all the way to the white. So it's just a little bit off white. There we go. So back to the watercolor basics folder. I'm going to scroll down to my salt brush and I'm just going to add some speckles along the dark bits here. I'm trying not to go too much overboard because that can just make it a bit overwhelming. Okay, so here we're pretty much done with the mountains. I might add more texture in a bit, but we'll see where it goes. But I'm gonna go ahead and add another layer. So let's just rename the layers. I need to be better about doing this in my tutorials. This is gonna be the mountain layer. Mountains, and then this one is gonna be the sky. There we go. And for the sky, I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of color swooping and everything, and we would, in real watercolor, we would wait for this to dry and then we would, you know, add the sky after that so it doesn't bleed into, so they don't bleed into each other. Actually, in real watercolor, probably would have done this last. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put this underneath. And so I'm going to select the area above the mountains here. And then I'm going to make a mask so that they don't bleed into each other from behind. So I'm going to go up here to Selection Tool, Automatic, and I'm going to tap on the screen. And I'm just going to move it back and forth until it looks like the line down here is like slightly overlapping. So we have that fun, nice, hard edge, but not really properly overlapping. Okay, like that. So that selection is made and it's being held there. And so I'm going to go to this sky layer, tap it and tap it again, mask. So now you see the mountains are blocked out on this layer. So we need to make sure that we're on the layer that says sky, and then we can paint, just turn that off. We can paint on this layer and it won't show up underneath of the mountains. Hope that makes sense. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to choose this amazing bright yellow here, and still in my watercolor basics folder, I'm going to go to my graded wash and I'll show you what I mean. I want to have, there's a really nice bright yellow right behind the mountains here. So in order to have that contrast, I'm going to do it more like just barely showing up over the edge of the mountains there. And so you see you can't see the yellow behind this watercolor because it's got this nice mask on it. Okay, so now I'm just going to keep on with my bleeding edge wash with the same color and just sort of push things around a bit and keep on working on this. I might actually go back again and do that. Do a bit more of the graded wash in a bit here. Just gonna go back to the graded wash and add just a bit more here. I'm sort of dragging it so that it looks a little bit like there's clouds in the sky here. I'm gonna add these more darker clouds towards the end, but I'm just gonna keep on with the blue color and the same brush, the bleeding edge wash, just to kind of fill that out in the background here. I'm just going to take that darker blue and add a bit more in there with the same brush. And just to have a bit more of an intense blue in there and add some texture, I'm gonna, let's turn that, okay. I'm gonna select one of my watercolor textures. These are a slightly different type of brush that comes out in an already sort of established texture. So I'm gonna select watercolor texture number 1 in the blue and just add a bit more in here. I'll just do the same with number 9 as well. I'll choose the other blue for that. So now I'm going to go back to my round brush in the pink and start to add the pink up at the top. So now I'm going to go to my blenders and I'm just going to blend this blue and this pink just a little bit to make it come together a bit more. So I'm going to use my random watercolor blender for this. And now I'm going to choose my graded wash. Oops, that's in the basics folder. And the brightest orange I can find in that color palette and start adding some little bits of orange here. For these little wispy ones, I'm just using very little pressure so that it doesn't come out super pronounced. These little clouds, I wanted to have more of a wet on wet look, so it's kind of like seeping into the background like this. This if I just taken the paintbrush while it was still wet and just taken like one stroke and just let it seep outwards. Just being very, very light with the touch of the pencil here. So I can see here that there's a bit of a shadow on top of these clouds because of the sun going down, and I wanted to try and emulate that just a little bit, maybe with this dark purple here. I'm just going to take this down about halfway so it's very faint. Okay, so at this point I'm just going to turn off the reference layer because I don't feel like I need that anymore, and I'm just going to take some more blender brushes and just move things around a bit until I'm happy. I'm going to take the large dark bloom and go back to my mountain layer and just add a little bit of a bloom on some of these areas. I'm not really moving the brush around too much, I'm just kind of keeping it in one spot. And just moving it around a little bit to get these blooms to come out. So this is kind of like as if I was dropping water on here, just to add a bit more texture. And I think I'm going to take the blue and my splatter brush from the basics folder. I'm just going to accentuate this blue just a bit more with the splatter. So that's my little watercolor sunset landscape. So I hope that you enjoyed that watercolor landscape tutorial. I am learning as I go along here. I'm certainly not an expert at this painting landscapes yet, so I hope that we can learn about this together over the next many videos that I'll be doing on this topic. If you have any questions or requests or comments or any kind, I'd love to hear from you down in the comment section. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.